welcome to church. It's great to see you. If we haven't met, my name's Daryl Holden. I'm one of the pastors here. Way to go getting here on a beautiful late spring weekend. I'm so glad we get to be in church together and enjoy this time of worship, and just grateful for this team who leads us in such a great way. If you're our guest, we love having you here. Thanks for coming. So you've landed in an important season in our church. For those of you who are part of Christ Community, you know right now we've got our church health survey going on. This is the last weekend of that. If you go to Christ Community and you have not taken the church health survey yet, we need you to do that, please. We want to hear from you. This church health survey is going to help set the course for the next 10 years of Christ Community, and so your voice matters in this. Whether you've been here for a little while or a long time, if you're part of this church, we want to hear from you in that. You've also landed here during Summer Serve sign up, and every summer we invite people to come and to serve for 3 services during the summer in Kids City, so that the people who are here and serving every week can go on vacation. We got somebody to fill their spot, and so we want you to do that as well. And then I want to say a very public thank you to Pastor Ezra for speaking last week. His voice is really important to our church. I'm so grateful he's willing to speak. You may not know this, but I'm the only one of our pastors who weekend messages are part of my normal workflow. So for when anybody else is speaking, it's extra, and it's extra work for them. And so I'm really grateful Ezra is willing to do that. He did a great job. I was in Texas with Marie. We were visiting our kids who were there for Mother's Day, and it's one of our son's birthday last weekend. And so it was just pure vacation for me, and I'm really grateful that Ezra was willing to step in and do such a great job for us as a church. So, you may not see him around this weekend because he's really tired. No, so when we're in Texas, there's this conversation that I know is going to come up every time we're down there. It's about retirement, and we have kids who live in Oklahoma and kids who live in Texas, and whenever we're around, conversation of where we're going to retire comes up, and I am a long ways away from retirement, and I think it's a way for my kids to kind of give me a little bit of hard time about how old they think I might be, but I'm a long ways away from retirement, but I'm good with the conversation, because retirement is one of those things that, like, I know there's a day coming when I can't work anymore, and I don't want the first time I've thought about it to be the day that it happens, right? That'd be foolish on my part to just pretend like there's not going to be a day out there when I can't work, and so it's one of those things, it's one of those days that you need to be thinking about long before you get to it. On Thursday of this past week, I was at Crown College's graduation. I love Crown College. I love our partnership with them. I love the relationship that we have with them as a church. Graduation was this beautiful ceremony, and watching those students walk across the stage and receive their diplomas, people who graduated have been thinking about that day since they enrolled in school. There's some people who enroll in college and they're not thinking about graduation at all, and they have maybe a great semester, right? Maybe 2, have a lot of fun, but they don't make it to graduation. The people who make it to graduation are people who realize there's this day coming when, I need to be thinking about it before we get to it. I'm doing a wedding later this summer. The young couple that I'm doing the wedding for they're planning their marriage. They're planning the ceremony, and not just the ceremony, they're investing in their relationship. They're building into themselves, they're building into their relationship together, and their marriage day is just gonna be this beautiful celebration of the beginning of their life together as husband and wife, because your wedding day is another one of those days when you should be thinking about it before you get to it. So we're in this series we've called Great Questions, and we're just exploring some questions that we get asked, that Bible asks to us, that God asks people, people ask God. And so today we're going to look at this question that Jesus actually asks his first followers, and this question is about a day that's coming that we should be thinking about before it gets here. So it's a conversation that's recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16. I'm just going to kind of work our way through the setup here for this question, and then we'll talk about it a little bit and have a couple of practical things for us at the end of our time. So in Matthew chapter 16, Matthew's one of Jesus' first followers. He was part of this conversation. He wrote it down. We've got his record of it. So when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? So Son of Man is one of Jesus' favorite titles for himself. It has roots in the ancient prophets of God, and he refers to himself as Son of Man more than anything else. So this is an interesting question. Who do people say the Son of Man is? So they replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. So interesting question has an interesting answer, because at this time, John the Baptist had recently been executed by King Herod, and everybody knew it. John the Baptist was a famous guy, and his execution was a big deal. They knew that John the Baptist was dead. At this time, Elijah and Jeremiah, they were both ancient prophets. They'd been dead for centuries. There's something about Jesus that has the people who are in the area, who know him, who see him, who hear him. It has them thinking that there's something about him that has them thinking that he's one of these prophets of God who's risen from the dead. It's an interesting thought. But what about you? Jesus asked. Who do you say I am? Okay, now this is a great question. This is a great question. This is, if you're a church person, you've heard this question before. If you're a church person, you hear me saying this, you might be thinking that this is our great question for this weekend. This is a great question. It's not the great question for the weekend. This sets us up. This is part of the setup for the great question that we're going to be exploring. Who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Messiah is a term. It's a term that means God's rescuer. And so God's a rescuer. He's always coming to our rescue. And the ancient nation of Israel, for centuries, the ancient nation of Israel had been in need of rescue. It was just a little nation, and they had been living under oppression, and they had been conquered by many different nations. And at the time that Jesus was walking the earth in this conversation with his first followers, Rome was in charge. Like, Rome had conquered the ancient nation of Israel, and the ancient nation of Israel, they knew that they were the people of God, that God was their God, and that he was always a rescuer, and he was moving towards them. And so in looking at Jesus and saying to him, you're the Messiah, Peter's saying is, Jesus, you're God's rescuer. You're the one that God has sent to come to our rescue, to come to our aid. You're here for us. You're the Messiah. And then he goes on and he says that, Jesus, you're the Son of the living God. This is an amazing statement, because he's declaring Jesus to be who many rulers, leaders, kings had falsely declared themselves to be, God. Peter's saying of Jesus, you are God's rescuer for us, and you are God himself. Like, this is a huge statement that Peter's making about Jesus. So C.S. Lewis is this philosopher and writer from the early mid-1900s, and he made what's now a really famous statement. His conclusion, after working his way through the gospel accounts in the scriptures, is that Jesus was either a liar, a lunatic, or he's Lord, to use C.S. Lewis's language of all this. And so this statement, again, let's not miss how huge this statement is that Peter makes. Peter says of Jesus, you are God's rescuer. You are the one that God has sent to come rescue us, and you are God himself. Peter's been with Jesus about 2 years at this point, and so either Jesus has pulled off a massive catfish on these guys, or Jesus is crazy, is contagious, and they've caught it, or Peter's got it right. Peter's got it right. And so these kinds of statements don't leave people like you and me a whole lot of room to just be like, about who Jesus is, right? Like, he's made some pretty massive claims. This is a huge claim. And this is the kind of statement that is meant to draw people like you and me towards Jesus, because God is always coming to our rescue, and he's coming to our rescue in Jesus. And so he's drawing us close. You are the Messiah. You are the Son of the living God. And Jesus replied to him, Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter. So that's this nickname sort of thing that Jesus is giving to Simon, son of Jonah. The name Peter, it means rock. And on this rock, Jesus says, probably not referring to Peter himself, but to the confession of who Jesus is that he just made. On this rock, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And we sit here 2,000 years after Jesus made this statement, and Christian people have had 2,000 years to read and to pray over and to argue with one another about what Jesus was saying here, what he gave to his apostles, what that authority actually was, how much of it was for them, what passes down to us. It's an important conversation, but for our purposes today, what I really think we need to do is dial in on what Peter heard Jesus say in this moment. All right, so Jesus says to Peter, I'm giving you the keys of the kingdom and whatever you, so here's what Peter heard. I think he heard three things. First, he heard, I am the right-hand man for God's rescuer. That's what he heard. I'm the right-hand man for God's rescuer. I'm the rock. I'm the one who the Father revealed who Jesus really is. Like he's the Messiah. God has come to rescue us in him. And I'm the guy that's right beside him in all of this. And he's going to rescue us. And when he rescues us, I'm going to be with him in all of that. He's going to set us free from Rome. Okay? When he gets rid of our Roman oppression, he's going to be king of our nation, and I'm right next to him. He heard that. He heard the word church. When we read that word church, Jesus says, I'm going to build my church and the gates of Hades won't prevail against it. When we hear church, we think of church, what it's become for us. When Peter heard the word church, what he thought about was the ancient nation of Israel that had been called out of slavery to Egypt, the 10 Commandments, the parting of the Red Sea, Moses, 10 plagues, all of that. He heard like that was the church, was the ancient nation of Israel that had been called out of slavery to Egypt and had been established in this promised land. And he's hearing like whatever the nation of Israel becomes with Rome gone, like I'm gonna be part of the foundation of that. But I'm part of the foundation of this new expression of the people of God, of my people of God. And so he's hearing he gets to be part of this new thing. And then he hears Jesus is gonna give me, he's the king, and he's gonna give me the keys to the kingdom. So he's hearing authority, responsibility, leadership, opportunity, and what we say, what's loosing, what we say, what I say, what we say is gonna go in this new kingdom. And Peter's hearing all of this. And I think we've got to give Peter all the benefit of the doubt, right? He's a good guy. We know from the gospel accounts, he's a good guy. He's not the kind of guy who's gonna take this position that's being given to him and use it for his own advantage. He's not gonna take power and use it to exploit the weak. Like he's a good guy. And he's going to use the opportunity, like this is gonna be good for him, no doubt. This is gonna be good for him, and it's gonna be good for his family, and it's because he's a good guy, it's gonna be good for the nation. Jesus is amazing. I'm a good guy. These other followers of Jesus, we're good guys. This is gonna be good for everybody. What Peter's hearing is like there's so much good for Jesus and for me and for my friends and for our nation in this. Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. When this expresses itself, it's gonna be good for us. It's gonna be good for us. And so Jesus, hearing Peter's statement, affirming it, ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he's the Messiah. Peter and the first followers think they're on the front edge of a revolution. We're going to cast off Rome. So this makes sense to them. We can't tell anybody until like this thing's ready to go or it might get shut down. Jesus has something else in mind. So from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. So Peter takes him aside and begins to rebuke him and says to him, Lord, this is never going to happen to you. This is never going to happen to you. So as Peter's saying this, I think part of the reason he's saying this, like, it's his theology. It's what he believes about God and about the way God's at work in the world. Like he's rightly believed that Jesus is the Messiah. And in Peter's theology, the Messiah goes to Jerusalem and conquers. He doesn't suffer, he doesn't die. He goes to Jerusalem and he begins to rule and to reign. In Peter's theology, God is coming to rescue us, and God's rescuer doesn't suffer and die. God's rescuer casts off all oppression and sets up the kingdom of God in this world. Jesus, you are God's Messiah. You are God's rescuer. You're not going to Jerusalem to suffer and die. You're going to Jerusalem to rule and to reign. God will fight for you. This is never going to happen to you. And I think there's a little bit of personal in this as Peter makes this pushback on Jesus, because Jesus and Peter are friends. They've been together for a couple of years. Jesus is a mentor. They love each other. And they're very closely connected, right? What happens to Jesus is probably gonna happen to Peter and to the other guys. And Jesus, you can't go to Jerusalem and suffer and die. If that happens to you, it probably happens to me, and that's not good for us, and that's not good for my family, and that's not good for our nation. It's not good. Like, the good guys can't win in this. The good guys have to win in this. The bad guys have to lose. The only people this can be bad for is Rome and anybody who doesn't want the rule of God in our world. Or Jesus, this can't happen to you. I'll fight for you. This is never gonna happen to you. And Jesus hears what Peter says, and he turns to him and he says, "Get behind me, Satan." Okay, now Satan is a word that means opponent or adversary. It's the name of God's greatest enemy. We'd also call him the devil. And Peter in this moment is, like a little while ago, he was the rock. On this rock, I'll build my church. Right, a little while ago, he's the rock. And now he's the opponent. He's the adversary. Get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me. You don't have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. All right, so we're still in the setup for the great question. We haven't heard the great question that we're going to consider today, but now we know that we're in a conversation about merely human concerns versus concerns the things of God. All right, so this is what this conversation is about, and we're hearing Jesus' strong rebuke for a guy who is letting merely human concerns shape the way he thought about life and what was important and the way things needed to go. "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You don't have in mind the concerns of God. You're just thinking about human stuff." And then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple." Okay, like, did you catch that, right? He's talking to his disciples, and he tells them, whoever wants to be my disciple. These are people who followed him to this point. Being a disciple is about following. It's about patterning your life after your leaders. So Jesus is being really clear with them about what it's going to look like, where it's headed, what it means to follow him. So whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for me will find it. And finally, we get to our question. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or to ask it another way, what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? And here is why this is such an important question. Because the Son of Man, Jesus' favorite title for himself, because the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they've done. Jesus says that there's a day coming that you want to be thinking about before that day gets here. Right? On this day, he's not coming in humility in some little obscure place, baby in a manger. This day, he's coming in his Father's glory with the angels of heaven, and he is coming to set himself up as judge over all humankind, and he is going to reward each human being for what they have done. You don't want to get to that day having spent your life thinking about merely human concerns and not the things of God. What does it profit a person to gain the whole world, forfeit their own soul? So I remember the first time I really heard this question. So I grew up in church, so I've heard this question my whole life, but the first time I really heard this question. This is not my first career, this is my second career. I was in my first career. I was young, I'm ambitious by nature. I was intending to be a world beater in that, and I was driving to the office one day, and Marie and I had just recently re-engaged our faith, and I had a 40-minute commute. So on my commute, I listened to Christian radio, and I would listen to Chuck Swindoll and Charles Stanley, if you know those names, their radio broadcast sermons that they'd been preaching in their church. On this particular day, Charles Stanley's son, Andy, was filling in for him, and Andy was talking about to gain the whole world and yet lose your own soul. And he said, he just pointed out, I'd never thought of this, that that's the best case scenario, right? Nobody gains the whole world in real life, but even if you could, and so here I am, this young guy with ambition, and I'm a good guy. So if my dreams come true, right, if my ambitions are realized, it's gonna be good for me, it's gonna be good for my family, it's gonna be good for other people because I'm a good guy. I could spend my life trying to gain the world and get to this day, this future day, and find out that I had been a hindrance to the work that God wanted to do in our world, that what I had accomplished wasn't enough and didn't really amount to anything. And that's a terrible pep talk for your drive to work. It's not what you want to hear on the way into the office, but it was like that 2 to 3 minutes of that sermon on the radio started me thinking that, like, hey, this is one of those days that you want to be thinking about it before you get to it, that the Son of Man's going to come in his glory with the angels of heaven and reward. And I could waste my life, a good guy could waste his life on merely human concerns and receive the negative eternal reward of that. And so, like, it's this thing that I think about, that we think about, Maria and I think about. We've started thinking about it and we've continued to think about it. We think about it still. And we've kind of got this little statement that we say to ourselves. And if you're part of Christ's community, you probably heard me say it before. This reminds us of, like, what Jesus has done for us and what we're saying yes to and what we get to experience in all this, that this life is short, the next life is long. If this life is short, like 80 years, 90 years, 70 years, like this life is short, and there's eternity on the next side. This life is short, the next life is long, and there's this day in between that we want to be thinking about that day. And so because this life is short and the next life is long, I think there's two things that we should kind of walk into together through this. The first one is when Jesus told his first followers what was going to happen to him. I remember he said, I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law. That's the religious leadership of his day. I'm going to suffer many things at their hands, and then I'm going to be killed. And on the third day, I'm going to be raised to life. Well, he did that. He did that for us. Or he did that for you. So remember, Jesus asked the question of, what could you give in exchange for your soul? So the psalmist in Psalm 49 talks about this. He says, no one can redeem the life of another or give to God a ransom for them. The ransom for a life is costly. No payment is ever enough so that they should live on forever and not see decay. Jesus did for you what you could not do for yourself. He paid your debt. He bought you forgiveness. He now has and offers you his eternal life. It's a gift. It's grace. Can't do it for yourself. Nobody else can do it for you. Jesus has done for you what you couldn't do. You can have what Jesus is offering you, forgiveness and life, as a gift if you're just willing to receive it. And so, I think we've got to think about that. And then second, what are you giving your one and only life to? This is the only one you get. So what are you giving your one and only life to? Jesus spoke in absolutes. There are merely human concerns and there are concerns of God. I think we'd like to see it as a continuum, but that's not how Jesus presented this. Jesus presented it in absolutes. There are merely human concerns and there are concerns for the things of God. And what are you giving your one and only life to? And I don't know that it's as much about the what as it is about our why. So why are we doing the things that we do? Why are you living your life in the direction that you're living it? Why do you have the priorities that you have? Why are you desiring the outcomes for yourself and for your family? What are you giving your one and only life to? And what Jesus is saying here to us is incredibly counterintuitive for us. What comes naturally to us, I just kind of labeled this as my way. Jesus said, whoever wants to save their life, that's what comes natural to us. That's like, I'm pursuing security and I'm trying to protect me and mine, and we want to be comfortable and we need it to be stable. And I've just used this term prominence here because we're good people and we want to win in our work and in our hobbies and in our parenting, like, right? And we're good people. So if we win, it's good for us and it's good for our family and it's good for others. And Jesus says, if that's the way you want to go, whoever wants to save their life, you'll actually lose it. You'll actually lose it. And if you are willing to lose your life for Jesus, to him, like, that's when we find it. And so this counterintuitive way is a way of self-denial and sacrifice and actually turning loose. And it's in turning loose that we gain. We gain. This is exactly the opposite way which you and I are wired and which you and I would normally go. We think we should hold on. We live holding on. And you get to the day and find out that is loss. Jesus says if you'll turn loose, if you'll turn loose of your life for him, for his sake, that's when we find it. Because your hands are now open and they're empty, and he can put his life in there for you. So we're going to wrap up our time together today. I just want to wrap up our time together with a prayer of response that's a prayer of turning loose, and then a prayer of receiving what God wants to give to each one of us. Whoever will turn loose of their life, they'll find it. If you want to hold on, you lose it. But if you'll turn loose, then you get to find the kind of life that Jesus wants to give to you. So I'm going to lead us in this prayer time, and I'm going to offer you some words. Okay, these are my words, but you can make them yours. So this has got to be like my words. It's got to be your prayer. And in this prayer, we're gonna turn loose what we've been hanging on to, and we're gonna receive and grab what Jesus wants to give to us. So if you'll please bow your head, close your eyes with me. So here's some words for you. Heavenly Father, I have been holding on to merely human concerns. Today I'm letting them go. I've been holding on to my life and to what is mine. Today, I'm letting it go. I'm letting it go to you, Jesus. I'm letting it go for you. Jesus, I'm saying yes to this forgiveness you offer me. And I'm saying yes to the life you want to give to me. I'm denying myself, taking up my cross. I'm following you. I trust you to lead me into your kind of life. So take my merely human concerns and replace them with concern for the things of God. So I'm saying yes to you, Jesus. And I and we are praying all of this in your name. So together, everybody says, amen.